ontology. Okay? Sige. So let's begin. Okay? So the ontology in Kantian ethics, no, the main groundwork of this moral theory is that the only thing that is good without qualification or restriction is goodwill. In Filipino, wala nang mabuti pa, no, sa kabutihang loob. No, but the translation does not do the Kantian idea justice. Because really, in Filipino, when we say kabutihang loob, it seems as if no, yung kabutihang loob is something that is something that we can cultivate in us, no? Halimbawa, paano mo ba i-develop yung kabutihang loob? No? Kailangan mong gumawa ng mga bagay ng mabuti nang walang hinahanap na kapalit. To that extent, it is the same as the original notion of goodwill of Kant. But as you will see later on, it's not that simple. No, hindi po pwede na basta sabihin mo lang, no, mabuti ang kalooban mo sa paggawa ng tama. No, why are you fighting for your rights as a Filipino? Sabihin mo, mabuti po yung kalooban ko. No, but it's not that simple. No, for Immanuel Kant, goodwill cannot be attained by simply saying this act emanates from goodwill. So let's try to find out, how do we know that something is a product of goodwill? According to Kant, this goodwill means good independently of its relation to other things. That goodwill is the only thing that is good regardless of its relationship with other things. What does that mean? Let's try to understand. Number one, let me enjoin you to ask the question, is helping good in itself? Like for example, pagdodonate. No, we're talking about the frustration of many kakampings, no, who no longer wish to help out of frustration with the election. They're now passing the baton to the government. Yan pala ang gusto niyong gobyerno, ha? O edi diyan kayo manghingi ng tulong palagi. No? Sila ba ay unethical if they don't help? Is helping good in itself? Or is eating vegetables good in itself? No? When your parents tell you, oh, kumain ka na ng gulay, is that good in itself? Okay? And the answer is no. They are not good in itself. Kasi helping and eating vegetables are only conditional good. They are only good. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me record this session so that I will just play this to the other class. Let me repeat, so I can record this particular. Or is the class recorded? The moment. Oh, it is. Okay, that's good. Okay, so why is it good? It is good only insofar as it is helping us achieve the good. Conditional. Why will you help? Because you feel like it will result in another good. Why will you help? Because you are looking at another good that will be produced by this immediate good. Bakit ka kakain ng gulay? So that you can live longer. Why will you help your neighbor? Because helping your neighbor will assure that once you're in need of help, your neighbor will help you as well. Assuming that these are your motivations. The question of Immanuel Kant is, can goodwill still be good even when it is unable to produce the results at which it aims? When one has goodwill and one acts on a particular, scenario out of goodwill, and the actor fails to produce the result at which he aims. Does goodwill cease to be good? Yan yung tanong. No? Or does goodwill remain good despite its failure to attain the results at which it aims? And the answer is yes. No? When one, for example, helps out of goodwill, for example, and suppose that the object of that help, no, yung tinutulungan mo, hindi mo matulungan, no? Nangangahulugan ba that the goodwill has been invalidated as good? And the answer is no. Because goodwill is not derived from the goodness of the results which it produces. It is good without condition. How is this goodwill produced? Of course, this is the question. No? So, it was Immanuel Kant, no, the philosopher from 1724 to 1804, who wrote about this in his text, The Groundwork of the Metaphysic of Morals, in 1785. 5 years after Jeremy Bentham's Principle of Morals and Legislation, right after American Revolution and the French Revolution. The American Revolution and French Revolution were both historical events that may have influenced Bentham's mentality, particularly his utilitarian biases. In this text, Kant, in effect, provides an alternative view of what it means to be good and to do good. Kant begins by talking about the concept of freedom. According to Kant, class, whenever my behavior is biologically determined, no, what would be an example? The example that we have here is gravity. There is no way that we can defy gravity. Or socially conditioned, like your taste. No? Have you met somebody who does not like your favorite food? May naranasan na ba kayong ganon? Yeah, very good. No, all of us, no, may have met someone who do not or who does not share our own taste, because tastes are socially conditioned. And according to Kant, these are examples, no? Social conditioning, biological determination. These are examples of things that might hold us back from becoming truly free. Hindi ka malaya. No? And according to Kant, bakit ka hindi tunay na malaya? Because these are things that stop you from exercising all your options. To act freely, according to Kant, is therefore to act autonomously. Ano pong ibig sabihin nun? What does it mean, therefore, to act freely? If it means to act autonomously. According to Kant, to act autonomously is to act according to a law that I give myself. What does that mean? It means that given all of these things that determine automatically some aspects of our lives for us, no, like biological determination, social conditioning, one must break free and try to find laws that you yourselves can legislate, and the laws that you will be amenable, you'll be amenable to live. No? Ano ba yung mga laws na to? No? Ano yung mga laws that will allow us to truly become free? No? Mamaya pag-uusapan din natin yan. Another concept in Immanuel Kant, no? So we're just going through the main concepts first. Number one is freedom. May tanong ba tayo sa freedom? We understand that. The second one is reason. What is reason? According to Kant, the good, duties, and rights do not depend on consequence, but on the fact that we are human. Okay? For Kant, no? Whatever duties we can arrive at, whatever good, whatever rights, they're not dependent on effects, but on the fact that we are human, because it is on the basis of our humanity that we obtain reason. For Kant, reason is the organ which controls our action. Of course, when we think of it now, parang hindi naman talaga organ yung reason, no? But for Kant, no, in 18th century, of course, they didn't have the facility to understand the human person completely, no, from the vantage point of physiology, just as we do now, no? We have some clues as to how the brain works, no? But at that time, wala. Kaya for Kant, reason is an organ. It is the organ which controls action, just as instinct is the organ which controls action in animals. And so for Kant, aside from our innate freedom, no, another concept that truly matters in this conversation is reason. Our organ which controls our action. We all have reason, no? And now we see reason not as an organ but as a faculty that allows us to make autonomous decisions. So more or less it's the same, no? And according to Kant, if reason is well adapted to what it's supposed to do, no, meaning its purpose cannot be merely to produce a will which is good as a means to happiness. It is not possible that reason's sole function is to locate a will that is good only as a means to another purpose, but rather to produce a will that is good in itself. Nakuha niyo yon? If we do have reason, according to Immanuel Kant, imposible that this reason is only after instrumental goods. No? If this reason would not wish to simply want to help so that you can get favor eventually, or if reason is fully functioning, it is not possible that this reason would only wish you to eat vegetables because you want to live better. No? These are poor examples, no? But you know, they make the point clearer. No? So for Kant, reason is there because it wants to locate that which is good in itself. Goodwill. Kasi sabi ni Kant, reason is what makes men captains of their own ships, no, in a manner of speaking, and therefore not at the disposal of the society. Reason, therefore, going back to the first concept, freedom, reason is what allows you to attain a semblance of freedom in a world where there are biological determination and social determination. Reason is what allows you to transcend. Do you understand? No, there are some biologically determined things. There are some things that are socially conditioned. But we can be free as far as reason can take us to that freedom. Okay? Nasusundan niyo pa ba so far? Do you still follow? This is consistent with all the recorded YouTube videos that I have appended in your Canvas modules. So now we go to this question. How is goodwill manifested? Okay? If reason is after goodwill, in order to restore freedom, then how is this goodwill manifested? Okay? So we're now done with the conceptual framework of Kant. The question now is, so paano namin ma-attain tong goodwill na to? Okay? And we say a while ago that goodwill is manifested in acting for the sake of duty. For the sake of duty. When I said earlier that goodwill is attained once we're able to legislate a law that we are amenable to follow consistently throughout life, this is the same as saying that it's manifested in acting for the sake of duty. That you make a duty that you are amenable to stand by throughout your life. Bakit ganun? Bakit ganun ang goodwill? Kailangan for the sake of duty. Because according to Kant, remember, you have two ingredients, reason and freedom. Human action is morally good, not because it is done from mere inclinations or instincts or self-interest, but because it is done for the sake of duty. For example, I am a generally generous person, no? Kasi I'm rich, no? So I can, I can pay for a lot of rooms in a high-end hotel. Sabi ko, all my students will be staying in this hotel tonight, no? Free of charge. I will pay for everything. I will put the bill, no? Pero I do that every day, just to anyone, no? Would you still feel that you're special? Would you feel that you're special? No, hindi na, because you know that as a matter of regularity, I do that to everyone. That's what we mean. If an action is done out of inclination, there is no moral bearing. Do you understand? So for Kant, an action is morally good if it is done not from inclination, but out of duty. That even if it is not convenient for me, I still do it because I know that I should do it. Do you follow? Because in effect, I am binding myself that I need to do this because this is what my reason tells me to do. And that despite the possible difficulties that it might entail, doing this action, no, is what I should do. Isn't that an expression of freedom? No, that regardless of other restrictions, restraint, I'm willing to override all of these blockage and eventually reach for the heights of doing what is right. Kaya siya duty. Nasusundan niyo ba? Can you follow? I'm looking at your faces now. I'm not sure that you follow. Do you follow? Is there any confusion at this point? Wala naman? Okay. So what is duty? Right? That's the next question. If I live out of duty, what does it mean to live out of duty? According to Kant, ito yung duty. And one example would be, is helping victims of natural calamity always morally good for Kant? Let's go back to the previous question that we raised in the first slide. And here we find the distinction between what is motive of duty and motive of inclination. Some people, just like the example I just mentioned in the previous slide, some people are doing an action because they are that kind of person. They are inclined to do that. Yun yung motive of inclination. But on the other hand, there are those who are doing an action not because they're inclined to do that, but because they are supposed to do that. This is what Kant means by motive of duty. You're sad, you're sullen, you're in grief. Ayaw mo mag-aral. But because you know that this is what you're supposed to do, motive of duty, you do it anyway. Then the action, for Kant, is something that emanates from the motive of duty. And therefore, if one lives up to that motive of duty, then one is a matter of fact acting out of goodwill. An action that is done, for example, talking about helping, solely out of natural sympathy may be right and praiseworthy. But class, for Kant, it has no distinctive moral worth. No? Kasi nga, you're doing it out of inclination. Awa ka lang. But an action done from the recognition of duty has its moral worth. Not from the results that it attains, but from the formal maxim of action that one legislates for oneself. Nasusundan nyo? If a person simply helps kasi naawa siya, or one simply helps because that's the kind of person that he is, then what is morally worthy in that, according to Kant? But suppose you find the person who does not even like helping, but sees that someone is in fact in need, and as such decides at that very moment, okay, I'm not a very helpful person, but at this very moment, I can see that there's another human person there, and that person is in need of my help, therefore I will help that person. That is morally worthy, according to Kant. Going out of your way because you know that it's the right thing to do. Now, here are some examples. no? From the series, I forgot what the name of the Kim's Convenience, no? So, no, I just took the picture from the internet. No, I just borrowed it. No, but really from Kant, we have the example of the shopkeeper. Sabi ni Kant, assume that there's this scenario where you have a shopkeeper who was given an opportunity to lie to a customer. No, say a customer asks, Mr. Shopkeeper, is that good? No, what you're selling in good condition? No, sabi ni Kant, in that situation, the shopkeeper may choose to lie and say, yeah, it's in a good condition, even if it isn't. But the shopkeeper will not for so many other reasons other than goodwill itself. What would be a good reason? Why would the shopkeeper tell the truth? Well, according to Kant, kasi you want to keep the customer. If you fake it and the customer eventually finds out na it's a bad product, then the customer is bound to be lost. Hindi na babalik yung customer. So sabi ni Kant, kung yun ang dahilan mo kung ba't mo sasabihin ng totoo to keep your customers, that's not goodwill. Goodwill is when you wish to tell the truth, and you tell the truth precisely because that is your duty, to tell the truth at all times. Do you get the difference now between acting out of duty and acting out of inclination? Nakukuha nyo? Another example of Kant is this miserable man. No, not exactly this. I don't know this man. I'm just, again, I just borrowed this from the Google images. No, so credits are definitely not mine. No, so this miserable man in the example of Immanuel Kant, no, is somebody who is miserable about life, who does not wish to continue living. No, and of course, because of that, the inclination is to, well, to commit suicide, for example. No, to just let go of life. No, in a manner of speaking. But if this man, according to Kant, chooses to preserve his life, not because he wants to live, but because he chooses to live out of reverence for life, then there is moral worth. Nanaintindihan nyo? Ibig sabihin, if Yishi or Trixie or Clarence, they wish to live simply because life is good, where's the moral worth? Nanaintindihan nyo? But if someone, no, who has a very bad life, no, wishes to live still, then that is where moral worth resides. Naintindihan nyo? Naintindihan nyo? No? It's like the example of a Filipino who wishes to stay in the Philippines despite the fact that he is or she is perfectly capable of leaving the country. There's moral worth. Unlike someone who does not have a choice. Naintindihan nyo? Because someone who does not have a choice is making a decision to stay not out of goodwill, because it is not out of freedom. The person does not have a choice. So the decision to stay is out of inclination. So for example, medical frontliners who choose to stay, even if jobs, more profitable jobs are available in another country, these are the real moral medical practitioners for Kant. So according to Kant, a maxim is a principle upon which we act. Any principle upon which we act. If I eat, I will be happy. So that's a maxim. Or a simple maxim such as, I will clean my room. That is a maxim. All of these are maxims. Okay? And according to Kant, there are two general maxims. One is a subjective maxim, meaning by these, a principle on which a rational agent does act. So any subjective principle, I will eat, I will testify in court. These are all subjective maxims. Objective maxims or principles is one on which every rational agent would necessarily act if reason had full control over his actions. Okay? So when you say objective principle for Kant, this is an action or principle on which every reasonable person would choose, if reason had full control over his actions. Okay? For example, dancing and singing on top of a table is something that ordinarily we can't say objective yan for Kant. No? Would every human person, would every rational agent necessarily dance on top of a table in a bar if he or she had full control over his or her reason? Huh? And the answer is no. How often do we find people dancing on top of a table in the middle of a restaurant or in the middle of a bar? And yet sometimes we find people intoxicated doing this precisely because this is not an objective principle. And for Kant, huh, goodwill is only located in objective principles. Okay? Kaya nga sabi ni Kant, no, halimbawa yung example niya, I will testify in court whenever I have a personal knowledge that can help solve a case. I will lie whenever my girlfriend finds out about my drinking sprees in bars without her. These are examples that are, they're not objective. No, they're only subjective in the sense that not all rational agents would do them. No, once they are faced in the same situation. And for Kant, no, moral actions are those that are objective. And thus, sometimes these are what lead us directly to what he calls duty. The duty in the Kantian terminology is the necessity to act out of reverence for the law. When we act out of reverence for the law, we act out of reverence for an objective maxim. I will testify in court if, suppose that's an objective maxim. Once I know of the truth. So if you embrace that, because you think that's what's rational and you do that out of freedom, it is not hindi ka talaga madaldalang na tao. So in other words, that's not your inclination, but you're doing it, you feel that that is a good maxim because, well, that is what any rational person would do. That if you know what's true, then you will testify in court if necessary. Then it is now categorized as a kind of duty. Duty yan. No? This law for Kant, no, appears to us as a law that we ought to obey for its own sake. And this is therefore what Kant calls a categorical imperative. Okay, a categorical imperative. Okay? So you have already encountered that term, no? Categorical imperative. No, what does that term mean? No? For Kant, a categorical imperative is one that you do because precisely you feel a sense of reverence, no? Not to any stimulus, no? Not to any inclination, but to the thought that your will is subordinated to a particular universal law, independent of any other reason. In other words, when a person seeks to satisfy his or her own desires or to attain his or her own happiness, not because he or she wishes to, but because he wants or she wants to obey a law valid for all men. In effect, that is to say that you have an objective standard that is not just determined by your own desires and motivations, but by the desire only to legislate a law that you're amenable to follow anywhere and everywhere. That is what he meant by categorical imperative. Vis-a-vis the other kind of law, which is hypothetical. Okay? Marami yan eh. Sometimes Kant says that some hypothetical imperatives are imperatives of skill. No? Parang halimbawa, when the end is merely one that we might will, pwedeng skill lang yan. Ibig sabihin, useful. That's why it's an imperative of skill. I want something, so I'll do this. No? So sometimes it's being called imperative of skill on the basis of use. No? So, for example, in order to attain an end, you perform a particular action. No? So, ano bang example nito? Magbigay nga tayo ng halimbawa. Halimbawa, I will follow my mother's advice if she will give me additional allowance. No? Hypothetical. No? So, parang hypothetical imperative of skill yan. But categorical, just like what we have been talking about since a while back, categorical imperatives are those that are linked to laws that you legislate yourself, that you follow through and through, and are objective. They are not just subjective, and as such, they are laws of action, imperatives of action that all rational creature would resort to if they have full control of their rationality and freedom. Okay? And what are these three categorical imperatives? Number one, according to Kant, the categorical imperative of universalizability. Act only on that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it becomes a universal law or should become a universal law. No? But by these, no, sometimes one of the misinterpretations of students, no, and other readers of Kant is that it is very close to what utilitarianism means. No? You do what is good for the many. But that is not what Kant means by universalizability. What Kant means is quite simple. No? It is a test whether my maxim accords with the categorical imperative. No? Halimbawa, ano bang example ng universalizability? Well, Kant uses the example of telling the truth. Oh, why should I tell the truth? Because it is a maxim whereby I can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. No? Do I wish for telling the truth to be something that everyone else will abide by in their daily conduct of life? No? Does this action, telling the truth, connote respect for other humans as humans do? If the answers to these two questions is a reverberating yes, then that is what we mean by universalizability. No? Are we willing to legislate these particular maxim as a universalizable action? An action that everyone else should subsume themselves to, regardless of condition. And that I myself am willing to follow, regardless of conditions. Hindi sinasabi ni Kant na itong action na to is what's good for everyone. That's not what he's saying. No? Or this action will yield the greatest happiness for everyone. That's utilitarianism. What he is saying is, when one thinks of an action that is universalizable, a maxim of action that is universalizable, the moral agent conceives of an action that he or she is willing to legislate and commit himself to as a maxim of his or her actions. Like telling the truth. Am I in agreement that telling the truth is something that every human person should do? Every rational being should do? If my answer there is yes, and I'm willing to commit myself to this, then I am in fact acting on a universalizable maxim. And along with this first maxim, Kant refers to the second categorical imperative, which is the formula of the end in itself. According to Kant, this maxim talks about how we relate with other people. If we can conceive of universalizable actions, the actions that every rational person might agree to engage in, then that connotes a vision of humanity as something that is equal. No? A humanity that is equal regardless of status. No? Because you respect all human beings as human beings. No? So therefore, the second categorical imperative has something to do with that. act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as means, but always as the same time an end in himself or herself. Huh? You do not use other people as means to your end. How do I win this election? I'm going to deploy troll farms so that they will be deluded into thinking that I'm the greatest candidate for this position. Anyway, they don't have to know the truth. They just have to vote for me. That's using other people, other human beings as means to your own end only because you're not even thinking of their own good. Why can't you respect them to make that decision for themselves, knowing fully well the truth about you and the other candidates? Outsourcing production to suppliers in developing countries. Are you familiar of that? No, how some how industrialized countries more or less outsource production to poor developing countries, no, so that uh, uh, they save on their production costs. No? Tapos they sell these products for a very, very, very parang expensive, no? Expensive price. No? Isn't this exploitative? No? Isn't this exploitative? When we had the surge early this year, there was a demand for test kits. Hindi ba? Walang mahanapan ng test kits eh. No? And you know, the suppliers that I found, no, luckily, no, that's why I was able to buy for myself and some of my friends who asked to pasabay, no, because precisely they couldn't find any supplier. Alam niyo ang mamahal. Umabot ng 6,000 per box of antigen tests. Only to realize after the surge ended, no? So ang dami sigurong test kits, antigen test kits na sumobra. Ang mura na lang nila binibenta. Can you imagine? No? Why did these people sell the test kits when the test kits were needed, no? Exorbitantly, no? Sabi ng mga estudyante ko at kaibigan kong mga ekonomista, ganun talaga eh. That's the demand supply. That's so inhumane, no, if you ask me. No, for me, economics, the laws of economics should not apply when a public health emergency is present, no? I mean, imagine ang dami-dami namang supply at that time na ibebenta mo ng napakamahal, no? So sobrang nakakabagabag how we use other people merely as means to our end. Well, Kant does not deny that we are using one another in this lifetime. Totoo naman 'yon, no? You use your parents use you, I use you, you use me. No? Kasi ganun talaga eh, no? In biology, we call this interdependence. In sociology. No? Because we cannot live on our own. According to Aristotle, no man is an island. We live with other people. And because we live with other people, at some point, we really need to use others. But according to Kant, sure, use other people, but do not use them merely as means. Yan ang sinasabi niya. If you go by the first categorical imperative that we only want actions that are universalizable, is using other people universalizable? And the answer is no. No? Corollary to universalizability rather, is the idea that we respect other human beings as co-equals. So if you see other human beings as co-equals, you don't see them as tools to your end. You don't just use your boyfriend so that somebody will chauffeur you to school. You don't just use your girlfriend so that somebody can cook you lasagna for your dinner. No? When you see them and when they drive for you or cook for you, that should not be the only purpose. No? You see them as ends in themselves. That's why sometimes you also drive for your boyfriend. That's why sometimes you also cook for your girlfriend. No? In this mutual relationship, one finds a defiance of a relationship of UC relationship. okay, that Kant adheres to. And finally, as a result of the first two categorical imperatives, according to Kant, we have to act so that our will can regard itself at the same time as making universal law through its maxim. What does this mean? It means that if we don't want to use other people because we respect them as co-equals, and the only actions we consider good are those that we can universalize, then we should also respect other people to make decisions for themselves. And this is the hallmark of some cherished principles in ethics and politics, such as democracy. This is what you've been hearing in the past few days. Even if you don't agree with the decision of the majority, it seems that that is what the majority thinks is right. And so, with a very, very heavy heart, sometimes we succumb to the will of the people because we respect that they are co-equals. No? Regardless of our own judgment, that the rationality may sometimes be impaired. Huh? Naintindihan nyo? Impaired by what? No? By the lack of information. Okay? By disinformation. But all things being considered, they should have the same moral and cognitive practices all others. That's why we respect. No? We are bound to follow a law because of its universality, and that rational agents as subjects are the ground of this categorical imperative. If this is so, the law which we are bound to obey must be the product of our own deliberation and will. And following the second categorical imperative, if a rational agent, any human person, is truly an end in himself or herself, then he or she must be the author of laws which he or she embraces and is bound to commit oneself to. Kaya siya mahalaga. Kasi kaya niya to legislate laws that he or she is willing to follow all the time. Kaya siya respectable. That's why you should not use him or her only as means to your end. And that's why when you consider your own action, you are thinking of an action that every rational agent also is willing to follow. No? Universalizability. Okay? So, marami kayong pwedeng pag-isipang examples, especially during this time of the elections. No? But one of the most common examples that Kant himself tried to think about was the issue of casual sex. Yung casual sex ba, sabi ni Kant, does it live up to the categorical imperative? Is it something that we can will to become universalizable? Is it an objective principle that we can just have sex with anyone so long as the other person agrees? Is casual sex not merely using another person for the sake of one's gratification? Do we trust that those who are into casual sex fully autonomous when they make the decision to make that casual sex? Magagandang pag-isipan, hindi ba? No? So pwede natin yang pag-usapan, no, when we go to the moral decision making in chapter 5. No? But you may, if you wish, think about this right now, no? After this class. Okay? So now that we're done with the second theory of morality, I think we're ready to proceed with the third next meeting. And this is, to me, if you ask me, one of the most important, if not the most important, theory of ethics. And this is a virtue ethics. Okay? So, thank you so much.